All right, so Project Nursery is still a go. We are working on project number 3 today, and that is going to be getting this changing table ready. Now I'm using an old dresser that my wife actually used when she was growing up, so we got it for free. We're trying to do this whole thing on a budget, but we did actually end up finishing that mural that we were planning on painting on the ceiling that we smoothed out in the last video. So I'm going to give you a quick look at what that's looking like right now. So we got the whole space painted, and it's looking pretty crisp in here, but the whole reason we painted the ceiling blue was to get this mural of the stars on there, and it actually turned out pretty sweet. I'm pretty excited for everyone to see what we've got going on. I'm gonna try and lay down and see how this turned out. So we tried to go with more of a random pattern, so it doesn't go all the way to the edge of the walls. But this is how it turned out. So with today's project, we got a lot of cleanup to do before we even start it. So who knows if I'll even get to it today. I should be able to. Got quite a few hours to put towards this. But essentially what we're working with is, I already kind of started sanding up here. We've got a wood grain on the top part of it. And then, it's hard to tell, but it's a little bit more of a modern look for the cabinet pools, and they're all wood. So what I'm going to do with this is take this bottom half and get it all sanded, and we're going to paint that, and then we're going to restain the top wood piece, and that is going to work as our changing table along with a dresser for our boy that we're expecting. So first things first with this whole project, as all other projects are that I work on, I need to clean up and get it completely prepped just so I have space to work and I'm not feeling any sort of anxiousness that I need to be doing something else. So I've got like 5 projects probably worth of stuff that I haven't cleaned up that I've finished. This is from the last video where I smoothed out the ceiling. We've got all the drywall stuff for that. There's some more remnants of that with the sander and the drill mixer. We've got some of my yard supplies out here just because I've got a bigger yard that I have to keep up with. I had a car that I was flipping that has Rock Auto boxes over here. I did some more shelving in my office. You've got some plumbing supplies, literally everything. So I need to get this all cleaned up before I can even start on messing with this. All right, so we're about as close as I think we're going to get to cleaning here. I have a 1-car garage and I have a whole wood shop. I do construction. I work on cars. There's just way too many dang tools to ever get this completely usable. So that is a future project for what I'm going to be working on, but I need to jump into this because I'm slowly running out of time as the day goes on. So essentially this is what our starting point is. We've got a pretty decent looking dresser here. Now, I already started sanding the top, kind of like I said. It was this dark color like the rest of it. However, there were some pretty bad dings in it, so I ended up just starting working on that one random day that I had a free second. So we're a little bit ahead of where we need to be. So next step is to get all of these handles off because my wife doesn't really care for them very much. I've got a full box of extra ones over here. So I've got gold. What else is in here? I've got some like hidden ones that tuck up underneath the drawer itself, so you can't really see them. That just looks like hardware. What else do we got? I got black ones that are the hidden ones, and then I got bigger gold ones here. Those are hooks. And those are also hooks. So it's pretty much looking like I'm either going with gold or hidden black because I think I've only got one hidden gold. And again, I'm trying not to spend very much money on this. So first step is get those old handles off, figure out which handles that my wife likes of what I have available. And then once she makes that decision, I will start patching the holes from the old ones and make it so that it's completely smooth so I can put the new ones on. So first step, I'm going to open that up. Those out of there. Oh, sorry, Jeff. You can come out. Looks like we got some Phillips on the back here. This is the first thing I'm gonna have to grab, and I think it is currently in this box of tools that I have been using. Yep, that one right here. So these are usually pretty easy to pull out. You don't really have to put much effort into it. It's just a Phillips screw that is super tiny. All drawer doors are pretty much gonna work like this. And if I'm really lucky, the new ones are just gonna line right up with the holes that are already existing. And honestly, I don't mind these ones too much. I think they look pretty nice, but the wife is wanting something different, so let's see. All right, we'll grab all of our options, and then if they fit right, maybe we'll do one of each. If they don't fit, then I'll just take a picture and send it to my wife. So right now, all I'm doing is just taking the actual door pull itself and comparing where the holes are on it. So I don't know if you can see on that, but well, it's just gonna follow my face. But they do not line up for that one, and that one is actually the same size. So I'm gonna throw one of these handles on. So we got one started from the inside. Oh, and they don't line up, fun fact. It's like maybe 1/8 of an inch off. I'll show you what I mean. So we'll get that screw in there, and just based on a quick look, it looked like they were gonna line up, but it's actually like maybe I don't even want to say 1/4 inch short. So I guess I'll just tighten one of the screws and then see if that looks good enough. It's gonna be off centered for sure on the picture, but it should be enough to get the point across. So tightening one seems to have done the trick for holding it in place. Don't think that looks horrible. Keep in mind, we're probably gonna be using a dark blue color on this, so we have to picture the final product with that. But I'm gonna take this middle one off, so that way she can kind of picture it without. Something that I'm thinking about right now as I'm doing this is the fact that this is gonna take up a little bit extra space above, and I need to make sure that the door is gonna be able to close. So, let's see here. It would fit over top of it like that, and then it needs to be able to close underneath, which looks like we have enough clearance to not hit the top, so I think we'll be good if we try to do something like that. Doesn't need to be anything special, just a Phillips screwdriver. If you want to use a drill, you can. Just, if you use a drill, make sure that you do not tighten with it, because you will strip out the threads. These things are made so cheap, and they just basically like self-combust, and it's just a pretty stupid design. But that's pretty much anything anymore. So honestly, I kind of like the black big ones the best that were original. Not just because it's going to make the least amount of work for me, but I just kind of like the look of them, and I think it'll look sweet when it's blue. I think the gold's starting to get a little bit played out. So it must be a pretty slow day at work for my wife, because she's already replied to me, and we decided on using the original ones. So that's actually going to save me a ton of time, which I appreciate. So I guess the next step is to start sanding down this whole thing so I can get it painted. So I just finished looking around my garage for sandpaper, and it seems that I have misplaced it. So I don't know what I'm going to end up doing as far as all of the sanding goes, just because anything that I do have left is all drywall sandpaper that I have for that big sander that I used in the last video for the ceiling. And that is all low grit. So I think the highest grit that I have is 100, and I think that might leave too big of a scratch. I had a full box of sandpaper here somewhere, but I'm pretty confident that I took it over to my brother's house when I was helping him do some work there. So all I'm doing right now is just standing, and you can kind of see that it's a little bit stripped out. So I'm standing now and just putting a stupid amount of pressure forward while I hold the drawer pull with my other hand. So as far as the sandpaper goes, I might just try 100 on one of the sides and see how it turns out. And if it's smooth enough, then I'll paint over it. If it's not turning out smooth as I want, then I will run to my brother's house and grab my sandpaper, even though it's half hour away. I've got so much of it, I hate to buy more. Man, this thing is stuck. Let me see if a flathead will get it. See if we can get it with a flathead. Nope, not up there. That might work. Nope, too skinny. Try the next step up. They must have cross-threaded this when they were putting it in, but this flathead is working, so that's good. So right at this point, as I'm starting to get towards the sanding, I'm gonna start thinking about what it's gonna take in order to actually paint this, and right now I'm leaning towards using a roller just because it's going to give me a super smooth finish. I think the smooth finish is going to make it look a lot better, even with like the wood grain that's going to be tucked behind it. I don't really like the look of brush strokes, so that's my main thinking right now. Of course, that's all subject to change once something goes wrong and you have to adapt on the fly, but that's where we're at currently. So next thing, we're just gonna pull the drawers out all the way. And these ones just fold up. Just gotta do a quick lift. There's no clamps or anything holding it in place, which is nice. Just go on top. And for this third one, same thing. I'm also going to get this other table that I have set up. I can use it as a workbench, more or less. All right, now that we are completely disassembled there, all I'm gonna really focus on doing is just taking some sandpaper, scuffing up the surface. I'm not trying to sand off all of the stain just because it's getting painted. The only thing that's getting restained is gonna be the top. So I'm gonna go over all of the sides, all of the legs and everything, get the whole thing scuffed up so that way the paint has something to adhere to. And then from there, all we really have to do is paint, reassemble, and stain, and then we're pretty much done. All right, so I started sanding in time-lapse mode, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk at this point, but I anticipated it being a little too gritty as far as using the 100 grit sandpaper, and I'm not completely confident that the scratch marks are going to be hidden by the paint. So I got the one side sanded. I'm gonna try using some cleaner and a rag and just paint that side of it. One, so you can get an idea of what color we're using, and two, so we can get an idea of if this is just too low of a grit. So it's kind of a tight squeeze back in here, but I'm just spraying it with some cleaner, and I'm gonna wipe it down with a microfiber, and then just lay some paint on it and see how we're looking. I'm not horribly confident that it's gonna stick, but we will certainly hope for the best because I'd love to be able to get this whole thing sanded and painted today. All right, so we're mostly dry now, and this kind of gives you a picture of what I'm talking about. You can see the scratch marks pretty prevalently, so I'm hoping that since we're using a thick latex paint, we're actually using Bare paint and primer. So this is a pretty good representation of what we're using as far as the color goes. It's more of a darker blue, and we're just trying to use some of these like muted colors, I guess you could say. But I think my plan of attack for this paint is to just brush it on throughout the whole thing, and then use this foam roller to smooth it out. And I'm doing it like this for a few reasons, with the main one being that I don't want to get a pan of paint ready just to like not use it for a few hours. This is just saving me unnecessary cleanup, I should say. So all I'm doing is just tucking it in these corners with the brush and getting it underneath, so that way it's got full coverage. And I've already dripped on the floor, so we're pretty much a lost cause with this thing. I'm sure while I was cleaning you could see how big of a mess I made with the floor itself. Hopefully I only need one coat, but I'll probably do 2 or 3 just because it's something that's going to be used pretty heavily, and as the years go on, kids going to be banging on it, and it's just not going to be used lightly. Alright, so we've got the paint roller ready, and all I'm doing is just quick pass over it to get rid of those brush strokes. And something that I noticed when I was painting the ceiling was that you can see the lines, so we do full passes up and down, so that way on the off chance that you can see the roller mark, doesn't look like dog crap. I'm one of those people who are extremely particular with how their projects turn out, and I will go and redo something if it's not the way that I like it. So you can see, but I don't hate how that's turning out. I'm actually pretty impressed with how smooth it is. It's got a nice orange peel texture to it from the roller, so I think we're gonna definitely need 2 coats. I'm probably honestly gonna go as far as doing 3. All right, so yesterday after I finished up eating, I came to the realization that I actually wanted to stick to that higher grit sandpaper, so I didn't end up coming back out here because I didn't have time to go to the store. But today I went and I grabbed some 220 grit sandpaper, and that's what I'm going to use to finish it. I just didn't want to potentially have some scratches in there, and it also let me have the opportunity to allow my wife to come home, check out the color that I painted that side, and she approved of it. So now I am full go, and I am just going to hop right on sanding starting right now. Me personally, I try to sand with the grain just so that way there's no scratch marks that show up. If you go against the grain, it makes it a little bit more prevalent when you go to paint over it sometimes, so you just got to be careful with that. And I am going around onto the backside for this, just a heads up, just so that it looks more fluid and there's not any brown that's poking through. So I'm just trying to make it right, essentially. So as the sandpaper starts to get more and more gummed up, that's usually when I start to change it out. And the reason that happens is because the stain that was previously on it kind of heats up and becomes more like a gummy surface. So it'll stick to this instead of sticking to the wood. So you just have to change out your sandpaper every so often. I've bought 15 discs. I don't know if that's going to be enough. Based on what I've done so far, it's going to be. Alright, so now at this point we've got pretty much everything sanded. I need to go back, clean all of the dust off, make sure it's absolutely perfect, because you don't want anything contaminating that paint when you go to roll it on there. So that is going to be my next step. Alright, so we're pretty much prepped with this. We've got the one side that we painted before, and you can see the rest is pretty much all scratched up now. And the spots that I went heavier were where there were nicks at, so now it's completely smooth for whenever I go to put paint over it. You're never going to be able to tell. It actually gave it a kind of cool rustic feeling, but that's not what we're going for. We're going for a little bit cleaner, more sleek, but I did spray it with some cleaner, so I need to let it dry for 10 to 15 minutes before I can put anything on. It got most of the dust off, but what I'm going to do is paint the whole dresser frame first. Drip found a toy. I'm gonna go play fetch with her in a minute. But what I'm gonna do is paint the whole frame first, and then I'm gonna set the drawers in and then roll the drawers. So that way I don't have to do any masking or do any special sort of like hanging the drawers. I don't really want to take the effort to do that. So I'm just gonna set them in the slides and then roll them. So at this point I'm stuck waiting for a little bit, so I will catch up with you as soon as this is all dry. Ready? Alright, so it is now nighttime. I ended up doing some other chores outside and it's freezing in the garage, so I'm gonna try to blast through this paint. I'm not gonna do a whole lot of talking, just work. So I'm gonna get right to it. You kind of already saw the approach that I take for putting this paint on. I go through all the corners with the brush, and then I take the roller afterwards and use that to smooth everything out. And again, it's just this bare paint that I was using before. So that's not looking too bad for the first coat. I'm happy with the color. It's looking really cool. I did get a little overexcited in a couple spots and went up onto the spot that is going to get stained, but it should be relatively easy to sand back out just with a lower grit sandpaper. But everything's all painted. I did kind of paint onto the floor, so before it dries I'm going to scoot it over so that way it doesn't dry to the floor. I don't want that happening, but yeah, overall, I think we're in a pretty good spot. So since it's so cold outside, I'm probably gonna have to let it dry overnight, so that way it is completely dry before I put the second coat on. And that is going to probably be tomorrow morning, and then I might be able to squeeze in the third coat tomorrow night. So if that's the case, that would be awesome, because then I could stain it and essentially be completely done with it. So I guess that is a wrap for today. All right, so we're back on the next day here, and it's actually looking pretty sweet. I think I want to get the top sanded in those few spots that I accidentally painted onto, and then I want to lay some stain on the top just so I can pick one before I finish up this paint, because I don't want to get it all dusty. It'll just be harder to clean. So I'll wipe it down once it has the dust on it and then put the rest of the paint on. So it's pretty chilly in here, so I'm going to get the heater running, and it's just a little propane heater that I use that puts out a crap ton of heat. I think it's like 80,000 BTU, but I need to get that running because the stain won't dry unless it's warm. So hop on doing that real quick, and then we'll get to work. Let that heat up for a second so that way it can keep the flame going, and then as soon as we let go of it, it should fire up. So I've got it on its lowest setting now, and hopefully you can hear me as I'm starting to get everything going, but I need to let that run, so disregard it in the background if it's annoying. Alright, so I've got a few different wood stains that I can use. Kind of go through them. We've got this lighter color. I don't think this is going to be the one. I'm not a huge fan of how it looks right now, and I want it to be a little bit darker. I think that contrast will make it look a little bit nicer. Right now it looks like a child's toy, and that's not really the look we're going for. While it does look good, I don't think I'm going to run with that style. So right now what I'm thinking initially is that this one, Honey, is going to be the best. We don't want it to be too dark. That's black. I don't think that's a good idea. Then we've got a super light one. I don't think this is going to be the one either. And then we got a Cabernet, which is more of a red color. And again, not feeling it. Right now, my initial guess, we're going to be using the Honey, but I'm going to get a couple different options on there so that way we can see how it looks once it's all dry. So just take a little dab of that, and then we'll rub it in. Let's see what this next one does. We got more of a brown color here. And then I'll let that, it's going to be on there a little bit thicker, so I'm going to let that kind of soak in for a second. So yeah, this other one's more of a red. I can already tell. I'm not really loving how that looks. So here's a bit different view of it. So there we've got the one that's more red. Not a huge fan of it, honestly. The brown's looking pretty good. That's about the color I was shooting for. And then the pecan color is pretty much clear. Adds a little bit of depth to it, but not a ton. So I think Honey is the winner, and that's what we're gonna run with. I'm not even gonna ask for approval on it because I know that's the color she wants. All right, so I got this thing all sanded back to where it was when I started, and I got the paint off of the fronts of it. So what I'm going to do is essentially just use a throwaway brush to get the stain on, and then I'll wipe it off with one of the blue shop rags just so that it doesn't leave any sort of pieces of itself back. Those things are pretty durable and I can throw them away. I don't have to waste a microfiber. This is kind of what we're looking like for the finished color. Next thing I need to do is get a coat of paint on, and then once I have that on, I'm going to be using this polyurethane. I'm probably going to do 3 coats of that on top of the stain, just because I am going to be putting a lot of stress on this tabletop, with it actually being a changing table. And cue the paint montage. This thing's gonna look pretty sick when it's done. I'm I'm really excited with how it's turning out. Another thing that I do when I need to do 2 coats of paint in one day is I'll just throw my wet roller and my wet paintbrush in a little plastic bag, and it'll stay wet for a few days. So if you ever needed to do something like that and you didn't feel like washing them, that's a really easy thing to do. So that way you're not wasting like 10 minutes cleaning them out every single time. And then it also poses the issue where if it doesn't completely dry after you wash it and you need to use it, the water makes the paint super runny, so it's kind of tricky to use when it is wet. So yeah, little pro tip, definitely wrap those up if you are going to be painting within a relatively short amount of time since your last coat. All right, so I went ahead and did that 3rd coat for paint on this thing. The top isn't drying as fast as I wanted, and I think it's just because the garage is super cold. So I'm gonna see if I can finesse this inside by myself, try and surprise my wife so that way it's done when she gets home. I'm probably just gonna film me doing it. I do know that I'm gonna have to stand it tall ways once I do get it inside, just because I've got a pretty narrow gap that I have to thread through in the hallway. So we'll see how this goes. Alright, so the last thing on the list is to get the handles back on, and realistically I could probably do a quick clean to this thing. But there is one tip that I want to show you that I learned from, I don't know, one of the previous times I painted cabinets, but essentially you'll take the screw, push it in from the front side to clear any of the paint, because if you do it from the back it'll rip it, and you don't want that to happen. It'll peel the face off. So drive the screw in from the front side. Probably be a little bit easier with a hammer, and I might need to go grab one, which I think I'm going to. Sometimes you get lucky enough and are able to use the screwdriver, but not in this case. So drive it through with the hammer and then poke it back through with the screw from the other side. Same thing with the other hole. Once that hole's clear, push it back through. Hopefully this thing's long enough. Take your screwdriver to put this thing back on and just run the screw into the handle like you normally would. And once it catches, give it a little space and then go do the other one. So that way they go in evenly and you're not messing up the threads. Every few turns, just jump back and forth. Make sure they're nice and tight. You don't want the handles to come loose at any point. And that's looking pretty legit. So I'm just gonna run through and do all of the handles and then give this thing a clean, and then we're pretty much done. All right, and just like that, we have the changing table done. It's all put back together. It's looking really good. Super happy with how everything turned out. I got 3 coats of paint on there. I got 1 coat of stain on the top. The only other thing I'm gonna do is go over the stain on the top side with a clear lacquer, so that way it has some sort of durability to it for when we're using it as a changing table. If you're just using this as a regular dresser, you're probably not gonna need that extra lacquer layer on there, but it'll definitely add some extra protection if you do something like this. So with all that, I'm gonna leave the video there. Got a few more projects that I need to do within the nursery, and then there's a lot of projects that are going on at my house that I'm going to be filming. And I'm just gonna be doing a little bit more in-depth videos for each project that we take on, so I hope that you like this one. And if you like this type of content, definitely subscribe, because I'm here to teach you some stuff. Hopefully it gives you some valuable insight as far as adding to your tool belt. And if you're going to do a similar project to what I'm doing, maybe you have a better idea that you can try and implement while you're doing it. And if it works, let me know, because I'm always looking to improve my skills. So definitely subscribe to my channel if you want to keep up with me. And while you're at it, hit that like button, because it's obviously going to help me out. But if you don't, then no worries. I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.